Hello there, and welcome along to Series 3 and Episode 18 of the Gardener Ben podcast, which is brought to you in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbiltsroses.com. Now, I know it's only Monday, but after the week I had last week, I think I need a little bit of a lie down in a darkened room. Last week saw me here, there and absolutely everywhere, doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, so there were many different shifts in gear to what I was actually doing. Monday saw me jumping in the car and heading off to the Cotswolds for a day of professional filming, creating media and videos around bare root hedging, bare root plants and of course bare root trees. This was really quite taxing but incredibly enjoyable. That dealt with Monday and Tuesday. By the time it was Wednesday, I was back home battling in my garden once again, and that rain just simply keeps on coming. There's now well over 150 flood warnings in place for the local area, and the Stour and the River Avon, which are both close to the cottage, are now in full flood, with no let-up of rain anytime soon. Actually, I think over the weekend we're due quite a large freeze and the rain will be replaced by snow, which is absolutely perfect. I have, however, managed to get out into the garden and start processing all of that willow that I've been banging on about for the last couple of weeks. There has been absolutely mountains of it, to be trimmed into small sections to be woven into the hurdles in the new peony walk garden, and then I've been cutting up the bits that I can't process into weaving into firewood. Now, I know willow as a substance actually doesn't burn particularly well. It doesn't emit a great deal of heat as it's not particularly dense and has a very high moisture content, but it will do quite nicely for kindling for the tiny little log burner that's in my writing studio. So I got the chainsaw out and logged up quite a lot of that and processed all of the rest of it ready for weaving. The hurdles I've been talking about are taking a nice natural and very, very organic form up in what is now known as the peony walk. Starting off around 12 inches high, they spiral into the new planting, rising to around 5 to 5.5 feet, spiraling and sort of undulating as they grow. These I've decided to put in place for one of many different reasons, the first of which is obviously to get rid of this enormously great big large heap of willow that had to be cut off of our weeping willow tree. The second is I wanted to add some drama, some height and some structure to the area while the shrubs and roses that I'm planting in it actually get themselves established, or the area might look quite flat and unappealing. It gives me sort of a little bit of a break and almost something to plant up against. The willow is actually a beautiful orangey yellow colour at this time of year, and it should retain its colour for several months. Out of the kitchen windows looking due north into this area, you can already see this beautiful structure glowing in the late afternoon sunshine. It is also the perfect haven for encouraging wildlife into the garden, otherwise known as dead hedging. This is a large body of organic matter simply left as a wildlife resource, somewhere for the creepy crawlies and our little pests in the garden to actually hide and make their homes. Over a period of years, this will obviously compost down and start to break down and rot, and will either need to be taken away eventually or added to over a period of years. But it's been a really good way of actually getting rid of a very large amount of waste, which I would only have to pay a contractor to come and take away anyway. So make sure that you head over to my Instagram, YouTube or TikTok to see what I've been doing with all of that willow that I've been cutting off. It was also time to update the Great Sweet Pea Grow Along. And if you're growing along on real time and following the process on my social media channels, please do check in and make sure that you're up to date with the latest episode. My sweet peas are now being hardened off to the larger environment in the greenhouse, so the cloche has come off and they're now independently growing. Up to around 3 inches tall, they've started to push out their very first leaves. I've checked on my chilies, aubergines and tomatoes that I also sowed around a week ago, and nothing has come up just yet. But some of these items take around 14 to 21 days to germinate, so I'm not worried about any of those just yet. So they'll remain tightly sealed under their cloche with a heat mat underneath them to keeping them nice and warm. I can also update you and tell you that my ranunculus have finally started to do something. These have often been a little bit tricky for me to grow. I've never had a huge amount of patience with them, but I've decided to give them another go. And as the heater remains firmly switched off in the greenhouse, it remains nice and cool, which apparently ranunculus really like. So I soaked my corms a couple of weeks ago and placed them into a border of fresh compost within the greenhouse, and they have started to root and push out their first tiny little green shoots, which is very appealing. I should have some flowers, I think, probably by around Easter to cut and bring into the house, which I'm very much looking forward to. I also this week managed to land my hands on two really nice vintage water troughs, which I found on a local face-based selling site. These were actually delivered by the gentleman selling them, and I couldn't be happier with them, giving me two large 4-foot long water troughs to actually now plant into. I'm going to place one up onto the top patio outside the writing studio, and the other one's location hasn't quite been decided. So I better crack on and start digging the pond, which is going to be donating quite a lot of the soil to fill these 3 new water troughs, because I still haven't got round to actually filling the one that's now on the side of the stable. And I really must get on and move Bring Me Sunshine out of its corten steel planter and get it into a much larger growing space. These 2 new planters I've managed to lay my hands on for the garden will increase my growing space ever so slightly, meaning I've got a little bit more room to squeeze in probably another 3 or maybe 4 new roses, which I've really been struggling to find locations for. So it does ease things just a little bit. I'm very excited that over the next week, now the willow hurdles have been woven up in the new peony walk, I can crack on and start getting the entire area planted. And once that's done, I can crack on and get ordering my mulch, which I must confess I'm a little bit behind schedule with. However, obviously the weather's been really rather nasty to us over the last, well, since Christmas it's been really nasty to us. So I don't think I'm really that far behind after all. I'll get my mulch delivered just as soon as possible and start getting the beds and borders cleared and mulched off ready for the season ahead. I'm probably going to need around 12 cubic metres of wood chip and probably around 2 cubic metres of compost this season, so it's not going to be a small task by any standards. Now, season 3 of the Gardener Ben podcast is slowly starting to wrap up. Rest assured, season 4 is already being filmed, and I have some absolutely amazing guests to bring you when I relaunch the podcast at the beginning of the spring. So we're going to be taking a short break in a couple of weeks' time. There's just 1 or 2 large episodes to bring you. First of all, I have a conversation which I have the pleasure in sharing with you with Neil from the National Chrysanthemum Society. Now, I haven't grown chrysanthemums for a very long time, having very limited success with them over my late teen years and a little dilly-dally in them when I was just wrapping up my last garden before moving here to North Lodge. My conversation with Neil inspired me to order some rooted cuttings and plug plants, which should arrive in around April. Chrysanthemums really come into their own, or the later flowering ones really come into their own, normally in September, October and the very beginning of November. So I've ordered myself a collection of plants off the back of this conversation, which will give me some interest, much as the dahlias do, as the roses really start to wrap up. I really hope that you enjoy the conversation that follows with Neil. He's been growing chrysanthemums for a very long time, and his journey into horticulture is very much like my own. So I hope you enjoy the conversation and it inspires you to head across to the National Chrysanthemum Society on Instagram and give their account a follow and maybe check in with a few of the events that they actually host and put on. Today on the Gardener Ben podcast, I'm joined by Neil from the National Chrysanthemum Society. Neil, welcome along to the podcast. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you, Ben. Nice to speak to you.
And you too, wonderful. Thank you very much for joining me today. I mean, I've been a fan of your, not specifically your Instagram but account, but the National Chrysanthemum Society's Instagram account for quite some time. It's something that us gardeners, we have threads of things that we like to explore. And obviously my passion is roses, but it also works its way through peonies and dahlias and sweet peas and into the wonderful world of chrysanthemums. Tell us a little bit more about the society and what it is and the role that you play within it.
Okay, so my role is I'm the social media manager for the Chrysanthemum Society.
Hmm.
I'm also the historian. I took over as the social media manager in November 2023.
Yeah.
We had some restructuring of the management committee, and I joined then. Um, but I've grown chrysanthemums for many, many years. Um, I'm also a trustee within the Midland Group. So with how the society is structured, we have the main parent society, and then we have regional groups. And I'm a trustee within the Midland Group because I'm in the Midlands.
Okay.
Um, I'm also on a couple of subcommittees within the society. So that's the literature committee. So that's the books and publications,
Yeah.
and um, kind of going hand in hand with social media is the promotional development. So trying to promote the society to the wider public through the social media channels, um, and again that goes hand in hand with the website. So we have a website manager,
Hmm.
um, and I liaise with the website manager. So it's quite, it's quite a lot of uh, fingers in lots of pies, you might say.
Just going to say, it's quite an interesting role for you to occupy, the historian role and social media manager at the same time. And what a wonderful blend of characteristics and skills as well. So bringing the historian side of things to hopefully a
Yes,
newer market and educating younger people, because obviously most people using social media are 40 and below, which
yeah,
is a really great way because chrysanthemums are enjoying a little bit of a renaissance, aren't they? For something that fell out of sort of public fashion for quite some time, dated,
yeah.
thought about as a little bit of old fashioned, something that your granny or your grandfather might have had, but they're becoming more fashionable, which is something that I'm really keen of. I'm hoping that the chrysanthemum is going to enjoy the success that the dahlia has had over the last sort of 10, 12 years.
Yes, yeah, very much. I mean, we are seeing a big increase in our numbers of followers on Instagram.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, in terms of popularity, the chrysanthemum as a garden plant, yes, it fell out of favor, um, and it became, as you say, a little old-fashioned. Um, as a cut flower, it's always been um, really popular. Um, I mean, if you look in almost every flower shop, every supermarket, they all sell chrysanthemums.
They do.
Um, it's the second most traded cut flower in the world. So from that aspect, although people say, oh, that they're a bit old-fashioned, they're not popular, somebody's buying them somewhere because
They
it's roses, chrysanthemums, and carnations have been kind of the backbone of the flower industry for probably 200 years.
Really, and I suppose
Uh,
nothing really
yeah,
offers the vase life of a chrysanthemum either, value for money
no,
wise. I mean, Alstroemeria will last for a long time, but they're obviously incredibly expensive. But
yeah,
the chrysanth, fairly inexpensive to sort of brighten up a vase in the house and last
yeah,
for, I don't know, a week, 10 days, sometimes two
yeah,
weeks.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, 2 to 3 weeks minimum. If you grow them in your garden and you cut them kind of, I suppose, half out when the blooms are halfway out, something like
Hmm.
3/4 of the way out, you'll easily get 3 weeks. You might even get a month out of them if you change the water and do the right sort of care needed.
Yeah.
So they are a wonderful, wonderful flower for cut flowers. They really
Nice.
are.
And what I mean, there's many different forms and types of chrysanthemum which people will see on your Instagram account.
Yes.
I grew up with well, my next door neighbour's father. This is a bit obscure, but my next door neighbour's father, he used to grow and show chrysanthemum, huge, great, big, bald type ones, which he had growing in cages in his garden, and they were the size of sort of mini footballs. But which
Yes.
particular type are the ones that you're particularly drawn to? Because I always find that when you find someone with a particular passion, there's always some form or type that someone is really smitten by. So what is it for you?
Right. So my journey into chrysanthemums really started when I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of got into gardening when I was about 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
And seeing my interest in gardening, I was given just one chrysanthemum plant. And that's really where it all started for me.
And,
So I grew.
and may I ask who the culprit for that was? Who gifted that to
Um,
you?
right. So my aunt and uncle lived next door to us. That was my mum's sister,
Uh-huh.
and it was my uncle's father. He'd grown chrysanthemums sort of from the late 40s after the war. Um, and he'd grown and shown chrysanthemums in the sort of 50s and 60s. And he still grew a few. And he said, oh, he saw my interest in gardening, and he just turned up one day. He said, oh, I've brought you this. Put it in a large pot. He told me how to care for it.
Mm-hmm.
And by September, I'd had three lovely red blooms on it. And I thought, I quite like this. So I grew some more the following year, took some cuttings, um, and I managed to find a few plants in the local garden centre, and I grew those. And they weren't show varieties. They were sort of really old varieties. I didn't really know what they were. I wasn't sort of that clued up on them at that point. But I used to read the garden news, and back then it was a newspaper. It wasn't a magazine; it was a newspaper. And each week in the garden news, there was various expert articles. Um, so you'd have dahlias, you'd have fuchsias, you'd have carnations, roses, vegetables, and chrysanthemums. And the man who wrote in the Garden News was a man called Derek Birkenshaw. And he was, at that time, he was the chair of the Chrysanthemums, National Chrysanthemum Society. And I followed his advice in the Garden News, and I went to my local library because there was no internet. And so I went to my local library. I got a couple of books out of the library on chrysanthemums. I read both books, and I'd still got a few questions that I wanted answering. So I wrote to Derek Birkenshaw at the Garden News, and I asked him if he could give me any more advice. And he wrote back and he said, oh, he was quite impressed that somebody at 13 years old was growing chrysanthemums and looking at exhibiting.
Yeah.
And he advised, well, join the Chrysanthemum Society, join your local Chrysanthemum Society. And he sent me a lot of information, and he said, could he come and do a piece on me for the Garden News? So this was in September, and the following May, he turned up with a photographer, with some plants for me. He'd put me in touch with my local Chrysanthemum Society. I'd joined the NCS, and he did an article on me in the Garden News. He then followed it up the following year, with my first year successes at the show. So I was in the Garden News twice, and it opened up a whole world of new friends, and I got to know people all over the country through growing chrysanthemums. Just a wonderful community of passionate gardeners, really. And of course, nowadays we've got social media, we've got the internet, we're better connected to people all over the world who follow a similar passion. But this was very much at local level, and through my local society. So I continue to keep growing these flowers, but the where I really where my growing really took off was when I joined my local society,
Mm-hmm.
because I met people who lived within a few miles of me who were all dedicated growers. We um, they exhibited their blooms. They had the right varieties, and suddenly I had all these new friends who wanted to help me. So I got lots of new varieties in. Um, I was still growing quite a lot for cut flower because a friend of my uncle's also grew chrysanthemums on his allotment, and he grew sprays.
Hmm.
And he used to work for my uncle, who was a butcher, and on Saturday afternoons to earn a little bit of pocket money, um, because gardening's quite expensive if you've
Indeed,
not
yeah.
got any income. Um,
Yeah, especially when you find a passion for something, you sort of disappear down a rabbit hole, and before you know it,
yeah,
everything. But for me, I mean, there's roses everywhere, and it's people. It's yeah, it does
yeah,
get a little bit. You have to fund the addiction somehow. So
that's right.
I'm assuming you started selling chrysanthemums from this butcher's on a Saturday afternoon.
Well, well, what happened was I went to help at my uncle's butcher's on Saturday afternoon, just cleaning the shop after the shop closed. And my uncle's friend said, he says, "Oh, I grow chrysanthemums on my allotment." He says, "I grow sprays." He says, "And I sell them up to all the um, I sold them to some of the florists in town." He says, "And I've got some ladies who do flower arranging and for church." He says, "And they'll come and buy them off me." He said, I think that these would be a good idea for you because you could sell them and it'd help buy your seeds and your
It
composting."
helped buy you more.
Yeah, it'll help you buy you more. So I thought, yeah, I quite like that. So the following weekend, we went over to his allotment and he gave me about 40
Oh
plants.
wow, yeah.
So I planted those, grew those, sold all the flowers. All the ones I were growing for show, I would bring back from the shows and sell them to friends and family. And any that didn't make the show got sold.
And
So I was,
and Neil, what sort of age were you when you were doing this? I mean, the
um,
piece in the magazine was at 13, and what time has passed since?
I was probably 14, 15.
Okay, yeah.
So I went from growing, first year growing just the one plant. The second year probably I grew about 40, 50 plants.
Hmm.
And then the next year I had about 300.
Goodness me, this has snowballed quite quickly, isn't it?
And yeah,
And
and
what were your parents' thoughts on this yeah, when you were?
um, they were very encouraging. I mean, I didn't have a lot of time for anything
No, I
else,
can imagine not.
so it kept me out of trouble. I mean, I'm a bit of a country bumpkin anyway. I sort of like the countryside. Do lots of walking and stuff. That's really where I'm happiest, in the countryside. So
Hmm.
I was fortunate that we had some land behind where I grew up. I actually still grow on the same land. It's now in I own it. So the land, my grandfather bought it in the 50s. And when my grandparents died, it kind of got split between my mum, my auntie, and my uncle.
Yeah,
And the bit that I've got now has come to me. So that wasn't a problem. It wasn't an issue with space because we had about an acre.
yeah.
So I just dug as my collection of plants grew. I just dug up a bit more,
You
a
just
bit
sort
more
nib,
pasture.
nibble, nibble, nibble.
So yeah, I mean everything really was done on, as I say, I was a teenager. I hadn't yet left school. Um, Everything had to be done on a very, very tight budget. The
Yeah.
greenhouse was homemade out of old window frames. Coal frames were just handmade. Everything I can remember um, saving plastic cups out of the school canteen
To grow your
and
cuttings
bringing
and
those
things in.
and putting and planting in those to save buying plant pots. Um, we would Dad would bring old pallets home from work, and I would pull those apart and make wooden boxes to put the plants in. So everything was done on a kind of a recycle reuse basis. So not it's not a new idea really. I mean,
No,
it's
no, not at all.
it was necessity rather than doing it because it was good for the
But
environment.
it was always quite the same for myself as well. I mean, I started gardening like you at a very young age. I was a little bit ahead of you with time wise. I was only about sort of 7, but it wasn't quite so intense, quite so quickly. But yeah,
Yeah,
again, everything that I did was remade, reused, repurposed, and I'm still doing it very much now as a gardener. Did a piece of media up in an area of the garden just a couple of days ago, and I was explaining about a summer house that I acquired from a client 8 years ago that they paid me to take down because apparently it was rotten and falling apart. And I
yeah.
thought it's too good too good to throw away. So all my geese would live in that quite happily. So we brought it home and built it, and 8 years later, it's still standing here. I was telling them my followers about a sundial which somebody got out of a skip and gave to me, and and a stone bench that my parents inherited that I got from them. And so yeah, my garden is a patchwork and a hodgepodge of reused and repurposed bits and pieces, which I just absolutely love. So it
Absolutely. Yeah.
sounds like you had a wonderful, wonderful start into the horticultural world. And may I ask, when do you exhibit your first blooms? Because it sounds like this is something that's leading to you quite quickly. Obviously, you
Um,
developed a little cut flower business to fund the
yeah.
passion. And when did you start exhibiting?
I think so. I grew, it was 1987, I grew my first chrysanthemum.
Yeah.
So I think I joined my local society the following autumn. So I think it was the following year, so 89.
Okay.
So a couple of years. Yeah. So really it was about getting the right sort of varieties. Um, the one that I got from the ones that I got from the garden centre really were old cut flower varieties.
Yeah.
And as I say, once you I joined my local chrysanthemum society, and I met the right sort of people, and I got to know where to get the plants from. And unfortunately, we had, only about half an hour away, we had probably the best nursery in the world for chrysanthemums. So that was that was kind of right on the doorstep. Um, so yeah, it was about getting the right varieties really, and then
Hmm.
and getting the guidance. Um, I mean, as I say, with social media now, there's such a lot of information out there.
There is
Um,
almost too well. They're not almost. There
too
is too.
much,
There is too much. Yes. Yeah.
but having that face-to-face um, information and visiting other gardeners. I mean, within sort of about 5 miles of where I lived, I could easily get to these friends on my bike. I could cycle there, and and you could visit their gardens. They would give you the information. They would come and visit your garden, see your plants, tell you what you were doing wrong, give you the advice you needed. And and of course we had monthly meetings, and I would go to the monthly meetings. We would have guest speakers, and it was just there was just so many of these small local societies, uh, many of which do not exist now.
No, it's
Um,
something that's really quite sad. It's that they have almost not disappeared because the ones that are still out there are really quite strong, and they're again
yeah,
enjoying a little bit of a renaissance and a revival as they should do. But yeah, I
yeah,
think we lost our way. I lost our way with an awful lot of things, and yeah, a lot of this community has seems to disappear. So, would
yeah.
you mind offering a little bit of insight? I mean, I've dilly dallied in growing chrysanthemums, and I confess that they haven't been particularly successful. I've fallen into the traps that I think a lot of people getting into a different subject has probably gotten into. Roses, sweet peas, dahlias, and peonies, I can grow without any thought to whatsoever, and I know exactly what they need. The chrysanthemum for me, I always end up with the same problem. It's always the dreaded rust. So
Ah,
can you offer us any insight for people wanting to get into this wonderful world of chrysanthemums and the huge or different array of plants and types that there is? Is there any advice that you can give someone for starting out of what to do and how to keep things healthy and what they should be paying attention to?
yeah. So as you've said, there's quite a wide range of chrysanthemums. So the three main flowering periods are the early flowering ones flower in September.
Hmm.
You've got the late flowering ones which flower in November, and there's another group of chrysanthemums which are October flowering, and as the name suggests, these would flower in October. However, with the October flowering ones, if you root the cuttings early and pinch them early, they will flower in September. And if you root them later and pinch them later, they will flower in November.
Okay.
There aren't many shows held in October, so most growers grow them for either September shows or November shows.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to grow chrysanthemums for the first time, a good place to start would be with early flowering. These do not require a greenhouse for flowering. So with lates, you need to take them into a greenhouse. So they're grown outside in pots. They're then brought into the greenhouse around the end of September, and they flower in November. Now, if you're new to chrysanthemums and you don't have a greenhouse, that's going to be a problem.
Hmm.
So early flowering are a good place to start for a beginner. So um, if you order your cuttings early from one of the mail order companies, there's only really a couple of main suppliers now.
And would you like to suggest, I mean, this is by no means an endorsement from your point, but a good supply where people might be able to get something that's healthy and strong and reliable?
Um,
Where could they
well,
find those for? Because I'm
the
going to make some notes here because I'm going to give them another go this year. Because
right,
one of the things that draws me back to the world is because again I grow a lot of peonies because it's an early season. Obviously the roses occupy and bearded irises occupy the early part of the season, and the roses occupy everything all the way through June, July, August, and into
yeah,
early September. And I love to really elongate the system the season out, which is why I grow dahlias because I like to eke out the system the season right to the very end. So could you? I mean, is there? Do you feel comfortable making a couple of suggestions of where people can get cuttings from?
yeah, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, the two main suppliers that are still going, if
Hmm.
you like, because almost all of the specialist nurseries have have gone.
Yes.
They've either retired or they've closed down
Or being gobbled up.
or been bought up by one of the bigger companies. So the two main suppliers are Halls of Hedden and Chrysanthemums Direct. There are some smaller growers who are supplying cuttings, but you will not find those advertised in the gardening press.
Yeah.
It's more.
Those are speakeasy ones. They're hidden away for the true for the true people that are growing them for societies and things.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we have a list in our publications. Um, I mean, the other thing is, if it's kind of a one-man band who's supplying, and they're quite specialized in what they supply, so they're not going to be not they're not going to have the capacity to supply thousands and thousands of cuttings to the whole country.
No, quite.
So they're not a big nurse or anything like that. So yeah, so they're the two main suppliers that do a good range of plants. So it's always advisable to order your plants early
Hmm.
because once they're their order book is full, they know what they can produce, um, and cuttings are routed to order. And this is I think sometimes people don't understand this, because they're not routing thousands and thousands of cuttings on the off chance that they're going to
No,
sell.
no, no, quite. Yeah.
They take around about 3 weeks to root, 2 to 3 weeks to root, depending on the time of year. So they need about a month before they need the cuttings to get the shoots growing. They then need 3 weeks. So you're looking at about probably a couple of months. So getting your order in early is advisable, and then they can look at their production schedule and so forth.
Yeah.
So if you order the plants, and again, depending on your facilities, if you've got a greenhouse and you've got a little bit of frost protection, then you could receive your cuttings in February time.
Yeah.
If you've got a cold greenhouse with frost protection but no heating, then March would be a better time. If you've got a cold frame, you could receive them in April.
Hmm.
And if you've got no means of protecting them, then get them in for May.
Okay.
Then they'll only need potting up 2-3 weeks in a pot, and they can go straight into the garden after the frosts have passed in. I like to plant out around the middle of May.
Yeah.
I'm in the Midlands. If you were further north, you might want to leave it a week later. If you're in the south, you might start planting early May.
Well, I'm still very cautious right down here on the south coast, because we get caught out by these weather anomalies, and I'm still very traditional as far as that's concerned. I'm always saying to people that my birthday happens to be in the third week of May, and I never bed anything out whatsoever until at least my birthday has passed, because we've had snow on my birthday before as a
Oh,
freak sort
right.
as a sort. I
Gosh.
mean, I'm thinking 20 years ago, but it did happen. I remember it happening
Yes.
quite
Yeah.
distinctly. So no,
Yeah.
pumpkins, courgettes, sweet, all of those things that you beans, none of those things go out until my birthday has passed, cake has been eaten, and then we are normally quite clear to go out. So yeah, it's very much
Yes.
to the traditional calendar. As for the weather conditions, we are much milder, but I say much more unpredictable than we ever used to be.
Yes. Very much. Very much.
So
Yes.
is there a couple of varieties that you might suggest that might be a great pace for someone getting
Ooh.
into the chrysanthemum world to start
Oh.
with?
That's a great question. There's so many. There's so many to choose from. Um, I mean, if I was to let's think of earlies. So Rita Fox, that
Hmm.
would be a good one. That's a white. That's an incurve. Uh, a particular favourite I like is Max Riley. There's one called Cornetto. That's a yellow intermediate. These are
Okay.
all early flowering or October flowering. Um, Another one that I'm very fond of is Matlock, which is a red reflex. So with the reflex, the petals, the florets of the bloom come down and tuck under to the stem, come
Yeah.
back to the stem. Um, so rather than looking like a ball on a stick, the the petals go in the opposite direction.
Hmm.
Um, Another one I quite like is Malcolm Perkins. That's a big yellow intermediate. Um, there's a particular family of reflex blooms that do really well at the shows. That's the John Wingfield family. There's probably about there's at least a dozen colours in
Okay. So
Jongleville.
lots for people to choose from.
Lots to choose from. They're I would say they're quite reliable for anyone that wants to get into exhibiting
Yeah.
chrysanthemums. Um, some chrysanthemums will flower outside without any protection. Um, so I mean, for show, we generally cover the plot. So, or people might grow them in an open-ended polytunnel,
Hmm.
or you may have seen where people put like grease-proof paper bags on the heads.
Yes, that's something my next door neighbour's father used to do. He used
Yeah.
to at that time there was when he unfortunately has now passed away, bless him, but he used to collect up the little wash bags that you used to get for your ladies' delicates.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Remember when brassieres had underwires in them and things that you have to
that's
put them in a
right.
little
Yeah.
bag, otherwise they'd ruin your washing machine back in the
Yes.
90s.
Yeah.
And he used to collect those back. He didn't collect the brassieres or the or the
No.
underwires to make it quite clear, but he did used to collect the little bags that you used to get with your washing powder, and he used to put the little bags on them. Again, I never quite understood that. But I'm assuming that's to keep the pollinators off of them, to stop them being cross-pollinated, or for them going over.
Um, Not so much the pollinators. It's more the insects that so the one of the big pests are earwigs.
Okay, and they like a dahlia. I'm assuming they eat the flower, do they?
Yeah, they eat they munch big holes in the petals.
Which for exhibiting is,
Uh,
I suppose, very, very much a no-no.
yeah, and you also get thrips,
Yes, yeah.
and they like the darker coloured flowers, and of course when they go into the bloom, they suck all of the colour out of the bloom, and you get streaky blooms, you get blooms that just kind of shrivel up and die. And they're so tiny to see with the naked eye. They're only probably a millimeter, 2 millimeters long. They're so
Yeah,
tiny.
they're a
But
big problem in the rose world as well. And with roses,
yeah,
they bore into the flower head just before it opens, and then when the flower
yeah,
does open, the whole thing falls apart. So it kind of
yes,
it shatters within I don't know 2 or 3 hours of opening,
yeah,
which causes mass amounts of disappointment. And I'm often asked how to deal with thrips, but very luckily I've never had the problem in my garden at all. So I've
no.
remained unscathed by them.
I know they do sell those, like like the sticky traps you get for whitefly.
Yes, yeah.
Um, they sell some blue ones which are used for monitoring uh, the flower thrips. And I know they have them in glass houses where they grow cut flowers, and that's to kind of monitor. But they do obviously trap some of the adults. Um, how effective they are at controlling the population, I don't know, but it might be worth something to think about if it becomes a real issue. Um, so yeah, so thrips, and of course you get aphids,
Yes.
green fly, black fly. Um, they just suck the life out of the flower, and you want to prevent it getting in that flower, because I'm sure you can understand there's hundreds and hundreds of petals in a chrysanthemum
Hmm.
flower, um, and once you get aphids in there, you can't see them.
No.
And when once they start to multiply, it's only when they start crawling out of the flower, and then you realize you've got an issue. So it's better if you can find them early and squash them. So as soon as you see any fly, just try and squash them. One of the other issues you can get is leaf miner.
Hmm.
That's the other big one with chrysanthemums. And you mentioned rust.
I did, yeah. I was
Um,
absolutely play. I mean, I've tried twice. First of all time when I was about 14, I grew them as a cut flower for a nursery that I was working at. We had them field grown, and I pretty much lost the entire lot to rust. I mean, the
yeah,
flowers were beautiful, but the foliage was utterly destroyed. And then I had another go about, wasn't in this house, so probably about 10 years ago before we moved to this property.
yeah,
Ordered some from a large supplier, online one of these large ones that comes out of Holland, and whether they weren't a
yeah.
great quality or not, I don't know. But those varieties, unfortunately, I planted them into the garden and had them as a plant within the garden. But yeah, they didn't last very long either. And I would put that down to probably stress. Would that be the right synopsis to make? That if they
Um,
dried out, that would cause them to have rust, or was that that's not correct?
hmm. I think if you've got rust, if you get, well, chrysanthemum white rust, let's just be clear, that's the one you don't want to see.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, when I started growing, uh, way back when, it was still a notifiable disease,
Okay.
and you had to notify the ministry that you'd got white rust, and they would come along and just destroy everything.
Hmm.
Um, it's one of those diseases that's become so widespread now that it's no longer notifiable. Um, and there isn't a lot available that you can use to cure it or prevent it. A lot of growers generally, if they get it, they will destroy the stock and look at getting,
And start again.
yeah, new stock in. I believe there are some varieties that may be more resistant to it, as there are some that are more susceptible. But I mean, I've never had it, touch wood.
Yeah.
I've never had it. And because where I grow, there aren't any sort of anybody quite close to me. I think I'm quite lucky that unless I bring it in on some plants I've had from someone else, um, I've been very, very
You've
fortunate.
avoided it, yeah, and I think this is
Yeah,
this is one of the biggest issues with gardening when you're growing a particular plant. If you grow too much of one particular plant too intensely, you can create unwittingly a real hotbed for a particular
yes,
type of pest or disease problem. And one of the
yeah,
things I go on an awful lot about on my social media channels is nobody. Well, not, this is my personal opinion. I don't believe anybody's really got the space anymore to grow one thing. I mean, my garden is it's an homage to roses. They are the star of the show. But
yeah,
I have a tapestry of other stuff planted alongside them, not only for interest and for colour and to keep me interested in the garden, but also to offer a habitat and a network of plants that is not just roses. And in that way, growing that way, you actually avoid that huge problem of, okay, just
yeah,
I'm just growing roses, and therefore if I have an aphid problem, or if I have whatever problem
yeah,
it might be, literally it wipes out everything at once and you can't get rid of it. So by sort
no,
of growing a multitude of different things, encouraging wildlife into the garden and then growing in an organic way, I,
yeah,
I managed to avoid an awful lot of the pest and disease problems. But that's
yes,
because I'm planting the stuff to go alongside that offers the habitat to do that. So
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
little bit of a complicated one. But I suppose in the world that you're in, actually, that's something that you're having to deal with quite heavy-handedly, really. Because if you're growing for show, I mean, you've got to be very disciplined and you've got to be very regimented. And as you say, no matter how clean and tidy and disciplined you are with things, if you happen to buy some cuttings from somewhere which
yeah.
unwittingly do have something on them, you've got to quarantine. Again, I was talking to
Quarantine. Yeah,
quarantine these things, and people look at
yeah,
you a bit strange and say, well, I have a place where I quarantine house plants. I know this sounds bizarre, but
yes,
I've got a collection of 100 house plants in one room in our lounge. And if I add something, and I have done this in the past, I've put mealybug into that room before, and it takes you so long to get out and you lose so many plants that I've
yeah,
learnt that
yeah,
actually the hard way is I have another room that I put house plants that I buy into. And
yes,
once I know they're clear, I suppose it's like keeping tropical fish. I did that as a teenager. Again, you do that exactly the same, don't you? Otherwise, you can cause yourself some real problems.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of white rust, obviously there aren't predators that attack it like with aphids and ladybirds and such
Hmm.
like. So with the white rust, you do have to. I think it's one of those diseases that we've had to learn to live with. I suppose it's a bit like black spot on roses. It's not the
Yeah.
end of the world, but you have to try and remove any leaves that you see once it starts. You have to try and keep, so don't go splashing lots of water about on the leaves if you've got white rust, because that'll only help it spread to more plants. Any plants that are really badly infected, you'll probably just remove them and put them in the dustbin.
Hmm.
Get it away from your plot. um, but yeah, quarantine is a big one, really. I mean, I the thing is, when you grow chrysanthemums, you tend to take your own cuttings. So unless you're buying in new varieties, or you're acquiring some stock from somebody else, and there again, there are measures you can take when you get those plants in, with quarantine, with trying to or you might get stalls at the end of the year and take your own cuttings. And it's about really cleanliness and removing any kind of old plant material that looks suspect, and really just trying to be as clean as possible, and remove any chance that you might be spreading this disease in your own greenhouse,
Yeah,
really.
it's a really really good tip that I often say to people. Now, obviously, roses are a bit slower. We're not renewing those crops every year. We're not taking cuttings from those every year. And if you get a particularly bad year, you can always, as I said to people, actually, with you mentioned black spot a second ago, that actually the best way of dealing with it is to avoid it in the first place. So if you had a
Yeah,
particularly bad season with it, and sometimes the weather conditions are not, they're not with you, and you cannot fight it. So you have to just draw a line about, and it's normally about this time of year. I say, right, the preparations for avoiding black spot mold and mildew are actually now. The
yeah,
cleanliness that we put into the garden over the next couple of weeks, and allowing the weather to do its work before we clear all of the
yeah,
matter that we can and either incinerate that or take that away from the plants, is now. And if you can do that, and in the disciplined moments of sort of January, February, and very early March, you can actually avoid reinfecting all of your plants. But you have to be disciplined. There's no point in saying, "Oh," and I do get thousands of messages every single year. Oh, how do I deal with it? So, well, again, I'm sorry if you already have it. You can't. You've gone too far. So let's
yeah,
let it go for this particular season, and we'll learn from it. And next year we'll avoid it, because you can throw all the chemical at it in the world. Not that I'd
yeah.
endorse that, but you can throw everything
No,
at it, and you still won't get rid of it. It's there, and it's breeding everywhere. So yeah, it's best to deal with, as you mentioned then, about the discipline and the cleanliness of removing stuff if you have any doubt, to taking it away from other things that you might be healthy, and actually
yeah,
sort of making sure it's clean and it's tidy.
yes,
So
yes.
going back, if we may, to the National Chrysanthemum Society, how can people get in touch with you guys, and where can they find you?
Right. So we have a website. That's probably the best place. So that's
Hmm.
at chrysanthemums-ncs.org.
Yeah.
Um, if you can Google the National Chrysanthemum Society, and that should be the address that comes up. There is a National Chrysanthemum Society in the USA,
Yeah.
so just make sure that you're on the UK one.
Well,
Um,
lots of my listeners will be joining you from America and Canada and Australia and New
yeah,
Zealand. So
we do actually, we do have. Now this is going back to kind of when the society started. So I mean, we have been around since 1846.
wow.
We're probably one of the oldest specialist plant societies that's still in existence. Um, and we were the very first society dedicated to promoting chrysanthemum growing.
Hmm.
So over the years, we've had a lot of other societies around the world kind of copying kind of our model, if you like, and they've set up. I mean, there's societies in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, um, the sort of all over the world, really. And we do have members in from other countries join us,
Yeah.
even though they've got their own chrysanthemum society, national society. They will still join us, the UK one.
And what a lovely way of crossing over information and growing techniques and trends and all of those wonderful
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, so we have a website that's it's quite fair. It's a fairly new website that was set up a few years ago. We previously had an older website, but this one's a little bit more up to date.
Hmm.
Um,
And
there's
if
quite a,
someone and if someone wanted to become a member, what could they expect? What could they expect from a membership?
right. Okay, so we do we have so as a member of the society, you get 2 publications a year. So these are there's about 120 pages, something like that, full colour publications. You get a hard copy delivered through your letterbox. Um, so one comes out in the summer around about July time,
Yeah.
and the next one's due this month.
Okay.
Um, so they have articles of interest in there on growing. Different members write articles. There are historic articles on there. There's everything and anything you can think about growing chrysanthemums. There will be an article in there. There's also, we have an advisory panel. So our members are our biggest asset, really. And we have a number of members that give up their time to as an advisory panel. So we have growers who are experts in various types of chrysanthemums. So we've got people who are experts in growing sprays, pot mums, fantasies, anemones, early chrysanthemums, late chrysanthemums, hybridizing. So if somebody fancies a go at hybridizing, we have somebody who can advise on that. And in our publications, we have a list of these members and their telephone number, and people can contact them directly. We also have in the winter months, so sort of January, December, the first ones start in December. So December, January, going into February, we have some winter lectures, and we're now doing those. This come about really since COVID.
Hmm.
So during COVID, we couldn't have shows and we couldn't meet up. So we started with doing winter lectures via Zoom. So these are typically around 90 minutes. So we'll have a guest speaker, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. And they get really, really well attended. I mean, we're typically around 80 people on a call. And of course, you don't have to leave your own home. You can
No.
just sit there in your armchair, put your laptop on, and take part in one of these.
Enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, we started. I think we started in 2020, 2021, something like that.
Yeah.
That 2020, 2021. Yeah, and we're still this, proved a real success. And because we've got members across the whole of the UK and we have some overseas members. We do get some of the overseas members. I mean, we had a lady who did a talk for us from North America a couple of years ago, who's involved with the Chrysanthemum Society over there, and we had that. So that was interesting. But we because we've got such a lot of members who grow a wide variety of types of chrysanthemum, there's something that'll interest everybody, really. So even if it's not a particular type of chrysanthemum you grow, you will still find it interesting, and it might just make you think, oh, I might have a go at growing a
might have a
few
go
of
at some of
those.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit of a dangerous thing sometimes.
It is, because I've got my notes down here, so I'm off to have a look at a couple of supplies in a minute and see what I can lay my hands on for next year.
Yeah,
Neil, it's been a wonderful conversation and lovely to get to know you, and obviously your journey into chrysanthemums. Very, very interesting, and something that sort of seems to have come up with young people quite a lot during my conversations on the podcast, of how they
yeah,
find something that interests them, often sparked by an adult on their periphery, someone, a friend of a friend, or as you say,
yeah,
a family member, and then that passion that
yes.
grows into something that lasts for an absolute lifetime.
Uh,
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to encourage all of my audience to head across to the National Chrysanthemum Society Instagram page and have a look at your website if they're interested in,
yes,
and have a look at the information that you're sharing. It's been wonderful to talk to you today. So thank you very much for being so generous with your time, and I will talk to you again very, very soon.
lovely. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Take good care
Thank
of
you.
yourself. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.
I absolutely adored hearing Neil's story and how he was inspired to grow chrysanthemums at a very young age. It just goes to show that if you feed that enthusiasm in a young person very, very early on and find something that sparks their imagination, it can create a lifelong passion, which is incredibly fulfilling. His journey is very similar to mine, and like him, I set up a small home cottage industry when I was very young, producing large amounts of vegetable plants like tomatoes, courgettes, and marrows, and bedding plants which I used to sell to local people from outside the house to fund my ever-growing problem with the garden. So it's really interesting to hear that I wasn't the only young person doing this and using the money that I was raising from the selling of my plants to fund yet even more plants for the garden. I can't thank Neil enough for being so generous with his time and for joining me on the podcast. I really hope that the conversation that we shared inspire you to head over to the National Chrysanthemum Society's website, or to have a look at their account on Instagram and to show their account some love. It has certainly inspired me to give this wonderful group of plants another go, as I said earlier, and I'm really looking forward to really developing the passion come October and November, when I'll be moving the plants into the greenhouse to give me a little bit of extra colour towards the very back end of the year. Now, as I've already mentioned, the Gardener Ben podcast is starting to think about wrapping itself up for season 3. There are just 2 episodes left ahead of us in this season. Next week's, I must confess, is going to be a very, very heavyweight piece of media. It's an incredibly long conversation, which have decided to leave completely intact, unedited, and exactly as it was recorded. Next week, I have the absolute pleasure in sharing with you a conversation with Paige. This is for the very first time not my guest's real name. We've had to change her name to be able to protect her identity. Paige is going to be sharing with you her journey and her share when it comes to being a recovering alcoholic. Now, there are parts of the conversation which heavily resonate with myself and my story, and it's incredibly relatable. So I do hope that you find the time to tune into the conversation next week and give it your full attention, as it's an incredibly important subject. After Paige's episode next week, I will be then once again joined by my husband Mark, who will be wrapping up season 3 with me for episode 20. So do look out for that as well. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you in association with Peter Beals Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, happy